What if your child could turn their love of sports into a thriving career, even if they'll never play professionally? The sports industry is one of the fastest growing business sectors with opportunities to go far beyond the field. Kids are interested in this all the time when they're talking to me. Today, I'm joined by Professor Stephen Master. He's an NYU faculty member and founder of Sports Biz Bootcamp. He helps me explore real pathways in sports marketing, media, sponsorship, analytics, and more. You're going to hear about his personal pivot from finance that just didn't fit him, and now how he aligns his values with meaningful work in the sports industry for a couple decades, more, I think 30 years. So you're really going to like this. You're going to come away with great ideas and another fantastic example of how you can take any job and apply it to a wide variety of industries. Okay, let's go ahead and dive right in. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lisa. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I mean, our viewers and listeners don't know, but we actually got to be in person at the NACAC conference last week, which was, I don't always have that pleasure with my guests. And so I already am so confident we're going to have a great conversation about careers in sports.
Excited to chat. It was hard for me to be in Columbus, Ohio, being a Michigan graduate, but I did it.
I'm not going to open that can of worms on this show. I always say we're not political on this show, and I think that's going to fall into that category. So we're going to, just like we did with aviation a couple months ago, we talked about like you might not be in the cockpit of a plane, but there are so many careers in aviation if you are enamored with that, with aviation. You know, I even think of like my nephew, he's in analytics for a railway system. So there are always a lot of, we'll call it supporting roles for any industry. And I regularly hear from the young people, 15 to 25, that we're supporting. They're like, I want to break into sports. And they're not going to be on the field or on the court. So I think your own career story is a great one to start with because you have had a lot of experience in a lot of different roles as you worked your way to NYU Stern and your classes that you teach there and the things that you're doing concurrently. So let's start back at Michigan or wherever you want to start
Yeah.
and kind of tell us your own career journey within sports.
Well, thank you. So I grew up in Chicago, in the Midwest, like yourself, and was always a sports fan, but I never thought about it as a business back then. It was, 30 years ago. I love the Michael Jordan era, which is where I grew up, the Chicago Bears, the Cubs, all of it. Was a huge fan, and then went to college at Michigan. And sports 30 years ago wasn't quite the business it is today. It's just there's been so much growth and so many more opportunities. But at the time, I followed a more traditional business path. I got a job in investment banking after graduating from Michigan and was working in banking, really enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. It wasn't my passion. So, but I did it. It paid well. The bankers are generally well compensated. I lived in Chicago, and
And
I
like, can I ask you a
decided,
question real quick?
yes,
How many years were you in finance?
I was in finance for 4 years.
Okay. And you pretty quickly knew like it was out of alignment with who you were.
Yes, I mean it was. First of all, as any young junior banker knows, if they take that path, they're working,
Oh my
you
gosh.
know, 15-hour days, 7 days a week, very
Yes.
often, not a lot of time off, and it's a grind. But you get into it knowing that, so
Well, I
it was
think
a great
I think
pathway.
what you experienced there is so common what I see, you know, students being given advice to go in a certain direction about like job security or prestige, income without thinking about some of the other pieces to really verify fit. So that's
Yeah,
why
the intangibles, exactly. Obviously, for someone right out of college, you're very well paid. And it is prestigious to say you work in investment banking. I worked at Houlihan Lokey, which is a pretty well-known in banking circles.
yeah.
And it's not Goldman Sachs, but still in the banking circles, it's very well known. And it was a great first job. I learned how to work hard, have grit, and figure out how to get stuff done in
Yeah.
tight deadlines. So that was that there was a lot of good about it. And also when I decided to do a career pivot and go back to business school, it was really helpful with my application getting back into business school.
Okay,
So
so you're dissatisfied. You're like, you know what? I'm gonna go and what did you get, an
I got an
MBA?
MBA. I went back to Northwestern. So I stayed in Chicago. I went back to Kellogg, the Kellogg School of Management. And I decided, you know what? I'm going to go back. And Kellogg's known for marketing. So I had the chance to go to either Wharton or University of Chicago or Kellogg. Those are the three schools I gotten into. I visited all three. Kellogg was definitely different. Wharton and Chicago are much more finance oriented, which is probably
Yeah.
why they let me in to begin with. And decided, you know what, if I want to go back into finance, that would be a great place to go to school. But that was not what I wanted to do. I figured I didn't know much about marketing, but I said, well, maybe I'll pursue a different path. And I thought Kellogg could open a few more doors for me. So if I'm in a career pivot, I'm going to go to a different type of program. And that's why I chose Kellogg.
Okay. And so you graduate from Northwestern, from Kellogg, and you've learned a lot about marketing. And so what's your next step? Not back to finance. The
It was not back to
marketing and
finance.
finance, it's interesting. We give all of the students that we have in our course, we give them the Berkman personality assessment. And people who are wired to thrive in marketing have a very different personality from a personality DNA from what we measure in individuals from somebody who would thrive and love finance.
Yeah, definitely very different. Well, as you probably know, or most of your listeners know, that in between first and second year of MBA is the all important internship.
Hmm.
So I was very cognizant and thoughtful to say, hey, I don't want to do the traditional route of management consulting or finance, which is 80% of my classmates were doing. So I said, I never left the Midwest. I'd love to be in this, I'd take a shot to sports, entertainment, media, marketing, whatever it might be. And went to LA during spring break and slept on a buddy's couch and literally called up every Michigan alum and every Northwestern alum in the entertainment business and said, meet me for a cup of coffee. And one of the things that you'll learn over the course of the next 20 minutes is I'm so big on building relationships, right? And that starts with that first meeting. And you need a network and you've got to put yourself out there. And as Wayne Gretzky says, I'm going to use the sports analogy, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So
Amen.
you got to take shots.
Well,
So,
I'm sure too, and we see this with the 15 to 25-year-olds that we're supporting who are career confused
right.
and not quite sure what they should aim at. It's one thing to sit behind a desk, right? And we're typing away and we're looking up things and watching videos about jobs. But the rubber meets the road when we get into what's really module 4 of our course, which is about curating real world experiences and building connections. And that's where it gets scary. Like imposter syndrome can set in, and you might get some no's before you get yeses. Did
I
you?
got a lot of no's. I got a lot of
That's
no's.
what I was going to ask.
Most of the people I reached out to don't come to campus, right? Like the entertainment companies generally do not come to recruited business schools.
Right.
Goldman Sachs and McKinsey and BCG and those places did, but that was, like I'd said, not what I wanted to do, at least for my summer internship. I wanted to try something different. So again, flew out to LA on my own dime, slept on my buddy's couch, and literally set up 9 coffee chats. And I chatted with anyone who would talk to me about the entertainment business or the sports business or anything in media. I
And
ended up
by the way, this was before Zoom, so that
this
was
was
in real
before,
life.
not only before Zoom, it was before LinkedIn.
Yes.
So I literally had to make phone calls to everyone and say, hey, can you meet me for a coffee? And you know what? I really wanted to not just have a phone call. I wanted to get to know them in person, right? To build a relationship. And I felt like in order for me to do that, I needed to be in LA and connect with people in person. So I can't emphasize the importance of that.
I do think that as you're saying that, you're like, I learned a lot of lessons from my time in finance, right? That grit showed up. Like, who just flies to LA, is willing to sleep on someone's sofa, and just
Right.
starts going at it on the phone to connect with alum? Like, amazing. And what a great example for our youth. Like, that's fantastic, Stephen.
Right. And now I say to my students that you have the advantages of LinkedIn that I never
Yeah.
had. Right. So I knew that Sharon Markowitz was a Michigan graduate, but that's all I knew about her. But she answered my call. We ended up meeting. She happened to work at the Walt Disney Company. And she had a great conversation. We had to really hit it off. And she didn't know much about sports. And she said, we just acquired this company. It was the mid 90s. ESPN, and I'm not sure what they do, but I know they're in sports. And I go, well, that would be ESPN. and you definitely don't know much about sports if you
That's kind of
follow
a
the
big
mascot.
deal.
Yes, yes. So Disney had just acquired them. And she said, I think I could use your help. We're working on some licensing strategies with ESPN. And I said, that would be great. So that was my summer internship. And that was my foot in the door, right? It's getting in the sports business is not easy. And I say this all the time. You got to get a few internships. You got to get some exposure to it and you've got to break in somehow. And this was my break, if you will.
I
So
love it.
that summer I worked in LA and it was such a like night and day experience from my finance background.
Yeah.
I was in an office. Here you're at Disney, you're on the lot. People are driving around bikes, and it's happiest place on earth, and they're all waving. How are you? They're so friendly and such a different culture and different vibe. And I said, I can get used to this. This is what I want to do. And again, I had worked in banking for 4 years where I was just looking at Excel spreadsheets literally for 14 hours a day. So this was completely different. And this was much more creativity and how we could come up with licensing strategies. And it was a completely different than anything I'd ever done before. And I really enjoyed it and it really resonated with me. So I had that summer internship experience. I went back to Kellogg. I continued to work for Sharon the rest of my second year at school and said, okay, I've got to figure out a way to get into this business. So did all kinds of interviewing, ended up someone knew somebody at the NBA and got an internship or interview at the NBA, the National Basketball Association. At the time, that was Michael Jordan was still in his heyday and playing. And like I mentioned before, I grew up in Chicago.
Yeah.
So for me, this was an incredible,
Amazing.
amazing thing to be able to go work potentially for the NBA during the Michael Jordan era as being such a big fan. So I interviewed with them. The reason they really liked me, but obviously they liked my finance background and that was interesting to them. But what really got me the job was I worked at Disney for the summer. So that internship, everything you do, it's certainly not linear, but you make different career choices down the road. And if I had an internship, let's say that summer in consulting or went back to banking, there's not a chance I got that opportunity at the NBA. But because I worked at Disney, had a lot of good experiences and stories to share from my experience working at Disney and the integration of ESPN and all the work we did there, they're like, this is a good candidate for us. So I ended up working at the NBA for about 4 years, and that was the time when they were expanding wildly international all over the world, and it was incredible. And that was really, as I say, was my Harvard Business School training in sports marketing, right? I got to work at the
Right.
NBA, built great relationships, not only at the league, but with agencies, media companies, sponsors, all the licensees, Nikes and Wilsons of the world. So that was really my kind of foot in the door was Disney, and which got me to the NBA, and kind of my career rolled from there. But it
I
was
love it.
really, it was an incredible job. It was a dream first job coming out of business school and very, very different. Going back to you make decisions, right? What I made less after MBA school than I was making before I went to MBA because I was in investment banking.
Right.
And if I'd gone to banking, my salary would have been double, maybe even triple of what I was making at the MBA. I was still fairly compensated again for that industry, but it was a much lower compensation or salary than I would have had if I'd chosen to stay in a finance route. But that was what I wanted to do. That was what I was passionate about. So I made that decision. And everyone's got to make that decision of what's most important. If finance is something you're passionate about, you could probably have the chance to make more money. I
Well,
didn't have that.
one of the things that we do with those we're supporting is we do a values inventory, right?
Mhm.
And so you're exactly right. For some, they're going to go, oh, well, money trumps, some of these others. And for you, you're like, the money's nice. I'm not going to be starving if I go this other route.
Right.
And I'm going to be much happier. And so it's really getting honest with yourself. And this is too where I see sometimes young people being influenced by other voices, right? On the prestige or money, like maybe the parent or some other voice in their life are like, oh, but you want more money, like we struggled too much. But that's not really what the individual wants. It's about supporting what your kid wants for themselves. So I love the example of really know what you value, right?
Yeah, my passion. And by the way, from a prestige factor, the NBA is right up there with Goldman
Yes,
Sachs as an example, but
that's true.
it just the compensation is just not there. So this 4 years, I literally traveled around the world. I was going to China, Australia,
I mean, that's
flew over to Europe.
adventure. An adventure is a
It was a
value.
venture. I was in my 20s, still in my late 20s, early 30s. It was an incredible opportunity for me to take a brand that I loved in the NBA and the Chicago
Yeah.
Bulls at the time and Michael Jordan and kind of be an evangelist to grow that game of basketball around the world. So for me, it couldn't have been a cooler job. And there was a lot of brand prestige. And at a cocktail party, it's pretty cool to have an NBA business card. But
Yes.
again, I didn't make nearly the financial rewards that some of my classmates made, or many of my most of my classmates made actually. But that was okay. I was okay with that, and I made that decision. So
So let's talk. Like I heard as you're talking, and my brain's trying to keep up with all the opportunities, right? You said like the sports, media, entertainment, the sports world is ripe with opportunity right now. And let's talk about what some of those opportunities are. You know, you mentioned licensing. Like talk a little bit about that. Let's start going through like where are some of the greatest opportunities if you aren't going to be on the court or on the field to work in the sports industry?
well, I'll tell you my next job after I left the NBA. I got a job at an agency, actually. So I went to one of the bigger sports marketing agencies in the world called Octagon at the time.
Hmm.
And they're still one of the biggest sports marketing agencies. And they've got two different sides to their business. One side is what athlete management. I don't know how many of your listeners have heard of or seen the movie Jerry Maguire, which is
Yep.
kind of that consummate movie with Tom Cruise where he plays a player agent.
So good. And I feel
Um,
like right now it's probably so old, but it's a good one. Go back and watch it if you've not
exactly.
seen it, right?
Exactly. So Octagon has a big athlete management business. Now it's funny, they call it influencer marketing. They used to be called athlete management, but basically they manage influencers, many of which are athletes or entertainers or YouTubers, and they help them navigate their career from a marketing portfolio perspective. So if they'll take an athlete and they say, well, they should do a State Farm commercial, they could do a car commercial, they do a Nike deal, and how, what deals they take, or they help get them deals and they help think about their portfolio of brands that they want to represent. So that's one side of the very different from what I did.
So
I
like
went to,
they are what I heard there was like you said, even a YouTuber, so which would just fall into the entertainment, but not necessarily sports, right?
right,
So they are representing entertainment, of which sports
entertainers, yes,
entertainers,
entertainers,
which is sports would be one bucket under that umbrella of entertainment.
exactly. And so we always say I work in the sports and entertainment business, right?
Yes.
And Octagon was a sports and entertainment agency, and athletes is a big piece of it. One of the important things to note is athletes are super important, but so many of these non-athletes, whether they could be an announcer, right? Like
Yes.
Bob Costas or Mike Tirico or Adam Schefter, right? They're in the sports business, but they don't play on the field either. They're announcers. And by the way, not only do they make a living doing that, but they also have a lot of endorsement deals,
Yeah,
right?
so those same people are using an agent as well.
Right, to not only negotiate their contract with ESPN or NBC or whoever, they're also working with car companies and insurance companies or beverage companies. So they
Yeah.
could be doing gaming companies. So so many of these personalities now have the ability to make incremental dollars outside of their kind of their day job to be
Yeah.
able to do endorsement deals and make marketing money. So that's one side of the sports marketing agency side, or one of the sports marketing agency world. The other side, which is what I worked on, is working with corporations and brands. If you go to any sporting event or even watch on television, you see a patch on the jersey, you see signage everywhere. If you watch the US Open, there's signage all around the court. Or if you watch any, soccer match, they have the rotational signage or a basketball game, right? So those deals are very, very complex, and they're in many cases tens or not hundreds of millions of dollars if it's a property like the NFL or the Olympics or the World Cup, right?
Hmm.
So many of those brands, like they would hire an investment bank to help them go public, or they'd hire a investment bank to help with a debt offering. They hire a sports marketing agency to help them negotiate a deal with the NFL, right? So that was the side I worked on. I worked on the brand side. Coming out of business school, and Kellogg is known for brand management and marketing, and
Yeah.
had worked in the NBA and did a lot of marketing deals. I was very valuable from that perspective of having worked on the property side and also, did deals with brands to an octagon where I had kind of understood that kind of connection between brands and properties. So the agency sits in the middle of that. So it's really then there's so many more jobs at agencies than there are at leagues per se, right?
Yeah.
So there's dozens of agencies out there who sit in the middle and they put together these deals. And the deals could involve brands working with media companies. They could do brands working with athletes. They could do brands working with properties. They could working with brands doing social media deals. But the agencies kind of sit in the middle of that and they do all of the kind of the work behind the scenes to make it happen.
Love it.
So that was what I worked on at Octagon. And I was in the agency space for about 7 years. And the reason I went from NBA to Octagon was it was more money, right? At a sports property, I was paid a certain amount, and an agency valued that experience, having spent 4 years at a sports league, and they were able to significantly increase my comp to go work on the agency side because they valued that.
It's interesting because I think that, you said it's really cool to go to a cocktail party and hand over your NBA business card.
Right.
And that would sound to somebody who loves sports like, oh my word, NBA or NFL, holy cow. But it was actually more lucrative to not be at the NBA for you than to be outside the NBA.
Right, because I was able to leverage
Yeah,
those
that
4 years there
experience.
and that experience and the relationships I built and my ability to understand the dynamics of the industry from the property side and
Yep.
having traveled around the world. They valued all those things, so they were willing to pay me more to, work on the agency side and represent their brand clients.
So
So
if you think about, you went to business school, but if you think about like your peers, even at that time, or with the opportunities that are available now, what are common college degrees? Is it in, sports, entertainment, sports management? Is it more just general business? What do you see people coming out of college with that are landing these opportunities? Or is it not the degree that's landing them the opportunities?
I think degree is important somewhat, but not that important. What really is important is getting those internships, right? At
Hmm.
the end of the day, I think just taking courses you're interested in and not the degree itself, right? So I teach at Stern, which is the NYU Business School,
Yep.
and I teach sports related classes in the business school. So they're getting a much more well-rounded degree. They're taking finance classes, accounting classes, general marketing classes, strategy classes, HR, statistics. They're taking all that stuff. And by the way, they take some of their electives. They could take a technology class or a digital marketing class or a sports related class. So I think the more well-rounded degree is probably the best bet. That being said, some of the sports management programs are top notch.
Yeah.
My alma mater, University of Michigan, has a great sports management program, which really dives deep into it. Instead of taking 1 or 2 classes, you could take 8 or 10 classes. But even the sports management program at Michigan, which I actually happen to sit on the board for, there's a lot of opportunities to take classes outside of your major because I think people are looking for well-rounded candidates who could write well, who could communicate well, who could deliver great presentations, who could build great presentations. Those are all
Hmm.
really important skills. And the biggest thing in sports, the ability to sell, right? You're always selling something. So you either selling yourself, selling your brand, selling a property sponsorship, selling an athlete. You got to be able to sell. And those are super important skills. And I don't really care what your major was. As long as you can sell, you're going to be successful.
So when you've got a school like Michigan who has an excellent sports management degree, are they helping students really land? Are they connected and say, like, here's the internships, it's easy to get one? Or is a student still, because I could understand if somebody's like at Stern at NYU, maybe they have to find their own internships, a little work harder to get their own internships versus like Michigan, like a top sports management program. Is there going to be better internship opportunities at Michigan over in NYU?
Well, I coined this phrase, what I like to say about at Michigan, and again, I'm an alma mater, and candidly, I had 2 of my children went there as well, so I'm a big fan.
So you're just bleeding blue
I am bleeding
everywhere.
blue, but I will say this: we joke around, and I coined this phrase: ESPN is good, but the best network in sports is Michigan, right?
There you go.
So,
So you're already
um,
at your internship.
right. So we have a really really robust network that again I sit on the advisory board for the sports management program, so I know it firsthand.
Yeah.
We do a really really nice job of engaging alums who work in the media business. Or I would say the broader sports and entertainment business. I don't want to just pigeonhole
Okay.
sports. It could be they could be working at Facebook. They could be
Yeah.
working at Fanatics. They could be working at Disney. They could be working at Paramount. But we really, really lean on our alums to try and generate opportunities or at least open the door for other Michigan graduates. And I would say this, a little biased, but Michigan alums look out for each other, right? We
Hmm.
look out for each other and we look out for people who are coming out of school. We all are very, very passionate about our school and we all want to give back. Not all, but as a rule, generally, we definitely do a pretty good job of trying to help other Michigan graduates.
I
So
hope and pray that that's the case for most schools, right? And I do think if you and I are similar age, we had hustled a network and it was probably easier for people to say no or not return a phone call. I feel like young people it's easier to get a yes. Of course, they get some no's, right? But it's easier to get a yes with like LinkedIn and alumni networks and things being online. You're going to get some no's and you got to be brave and you got to keep going to network and build those opportunities for yourself. But I hope that students experience and the students we work with have experienced a lot of yeses.
100%. And it goes back to my story. I got that internship at Disney. I didn't just reach out cold. I mean, I didn't have LinkedIn, but I phone calls, but I went through the Kellogg Alumni Directory and the Michigan Alumni Directory, the two
Yeah.
places I'd gone to school, because I knew there was a higher propensity for them to say yes,
Yeah,
right? It
absolutely.
was easier to get to yes. And by the way, I get people all the time, hey, will you talk to my friend's cousin who wants to be in the sports business? And sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. If it's a Michigan kid, I almost always do it,
Yeah,
right?
lean into your alumni network, which also brings me to a question. We support students on all educational pathways, right? Not
Hmm.
everybody's wants to go or can afford to go to college or even desires to go to college. Is the sports entertainment industry, one in which you really need a degree to break in, or are there opportunities to find to like prove yourself and work your way up?
Good question. I think it certainly helps, right?
Yeah.
Because there's so many qualified people who do have degrees.
Yep.
And as someone who's 18 right out of high school and doesn't get one, it'll definitely be harder. I mean,
Yep.
look, you could have had a summer internship selling beer at Wrigley Field or selling soft drinks at Wrigley Field, and maybe you're breaking the Cubs that way.
Yeah.
But I definitely think it's easier if you have a college degree to break into the business because they
Yeah.
want hustle for sure. And if you're great at sales, you're great at sales. But I feel like you just definitely learn some skills and learn about the business a bit by taking a few classes about
Right.
marketing to really help. And it's such a competitive space that if given the choice between someone who has a degree and who's had 2 or 3 internships during their college years versus someone who hasn't, they're almost always going to side with the person who's got
Yeah.
experience in the internship. So, which is why I got that job at the NBA, as the story I
Right.
told earlier, right?
Well, I mean, internships are fantastic because really it's a multiple month tryout that the employer can try out the candidate. It's like the longest, job interview ever to see if you're really a fit without any, it's low risk for them before they say yes and make a commitment, which they're just so valuable.
Right. And
So,
people are shaping their narrative so much younger now, right? Like I
yeah.
just recently started, like I said, I teach in college, but I recently started a sports business boot camp geared toward high school kids.
That's
And the
what I wanted
reason,
to talk about next. Yeah, like
yeah,
you've got your consulting, you've got your teaching at NYU. Tell us a little bit because you are with this sports business camp for young people. You're really trying to give them some experiences and teach them. How are you supporting them and what are some of your gems that they're getting out of that?
right. I've always been passionate about that intersection of sports and education, right? I started at NYU in 2004 when I was still working full time in corporate jobs as an adjunct. And the reason I did it is because I just love teaching. I love being able to pay it forward and kind of educating that next generation of business leaders. And in this case, hopefully sports business leaders. So I've been doing it for 21 years. I've been teaching. And what I found was, as I was talking to parents and even my own son, still in high school, he's a senior in high school, was more and more high school kids were thinking about college and what do they want to do in college? And they're feeling this pressure to think about, hey, do I want to be a lawyer? Do I want to be a doctor? When I was in high school, I just thought like, I just got to get into college. And now more and more thinking about their application and how they could have a good application, how they could be thinking about maybe, you call it a passion project, a capstone project, whatever it is. They all have different names, but at the end of the day, they're saying, okay, if I want to pursue this path, I got to start thinking about it at 16.
Yeah.
What can I do? Maybe shadow somebody. So I developed the sports business boot camp, and the sports business boot camp is really for high achieving high school students who want exposure to a college level course. I've basically taken my NYU course, which I've been teaching for 20 plus years, which uses Harvard Business School case studies. And we don't use a textbook. We really use real world case studies. I bring
Yeah.
in great guest speakers from the industry so they can learn about different careers in sports, learn about different pathways to sports. And I've repackaged that for high school kids. And the initial response has been fantastic. So I encourage anybody who is of that age, who's 15 to 18, who's thinking about potentially pursuing that. Maybe they don't know what they want to do, but hey, I have interest. This might be a passion that I have. I love sports. Can I actually take my passion for things on the field and take it off the field? And, what's the business behind the game?
Right.
Well, this is a great way to explore it, and it's a low risk way to do it. Our boot camps are generally a couple of days. They're not super expensive. It's a great exposure to, like you said, you don't know what you don't know, and you think, hey, I love baseball. I want to go work you're in Cleveland, the Guardians, or I live in New York, the Yankees. There's a lot more you can do in sports than go work for your local baseball team. And we get really into that, and we get to do these case studies, and we have these different projects that students really are enjoying, and they're getting exposure to a college level course. And that's what's the important thing about the boot camps.
Well,
Giving
before
people
you go and
exposure.
you spend all of that money on
Exactly.
tuition. I had one of our students, and this probably was about 10 years ago. It thought for sure he wanted IT and computer science, and he was in high school and he was crafting that fit to major, which we have a past podcast episode with Rick Clark of Georgia Tech, where he
Hmm.
talks about how within admissions they're evaluating that fit to major, right?
Right.
And so they're going to look at what is your narrative throughout high school that supports your choice of major. So the student we had for sure, like IT, computers, big gamer, smart
Right.
kid. He could have handled the computer science degree for sure. It does this internship heading into his junior year of high school and absolutely hated it
Right.
and was so bummed. And I'm like, are you kidding? That's a win. Like
Found
you,
out when you're 16, right? Much
that's
better than
right.
finding out when you're 26.
Exactly. We got to curate those experiences younger so that we know. And honestly, at the very end of his internship, some of my listeners have heard this story because it's one of my favorite ones. Because we reframed this isn't a fit to a win because he was really bummed out that he had invested all this time. And I'm like, well, okay, you made money and you've got something going on your
Right.
resume, but you know that you don't want to do this. The very end of that internship, because he stuck with it to the very end.
Right.
The IT department, it was at the nation's largest grocery chain, which is Kroger, which is headquartered here in Cincinnati. And they did something with the finance department. Well, he lit up. He liked what he was seeing over
Right.
there. So then he curated some additional real world experiences to verify fit there. And Stephen, you'll be happy to know he went to Michigan to Ross
There you go.
and got a finance degree up there, and he works on Wall Street now. But it's all about verifying fit. So,
And by the way, in sports, there's so many. If you get a law degree, you could be a sports lawyer, work on
yes,
sports transactions if you're in finance. Now, sports has become an asset class. So there's so many opportunities in sports finance where it used to just be a couple of rich owners that own it. Now they're selling minority interest, and there's all these new leagues and new teams, and it's a very active marketplace, right? All the streaming companies, Netflix, Amazon Prime, they all have sports rights, right? So there's so many different pathways to sports and so many things that you could be interested in, and then secondarily still work in sports, right? It
I
doesn't
love it.
necessarily need to go work for the Yankees and sell tickets and sponsorship for the Yankees. And I keep using them because they're a well-known, high-profile
Right.
franchise, and everyone thinks that that's what I love baseball. I love sports. I want to go work for the Yankees. You and 100 million other people love sports and baseball, right? You have to have a real point of difference. And how do you want to stand out? And you do that, like you said it perfectly. Go do a few internships and see what you really like. And maybe you don't want to work in sports, or maybe you want to work in sports in a different capacity than you initially thought.
Right. Well, and to that point of the story I told about the IT internship,
Hmm.
when you go get an internship, you are going to see other departments, other people in
Exactly.
action, and take advantage of your time there and ask to talk to other professionals.
Well, yeah, one of the things I talk about in my sports business boot camp is the three most important words in sports, and I hold them: relationships, relationships, relationships. It's so critical. You really, really need to build relationships internally, wherever you do your internships or your company when you start your first job, or and externally. Go for cups of coffee with people like I did back in LA in
Yeah.
the mid 90s. It's so important. Just talk to people, build up that network, build up those people of mentors. It's so critical to your career because most of the time you're not going to stay at one job for 30 years. You're going to move around. And generally, you find yourself at your next job because of someone you worked with at a prior job, because they know you, they like you, they trust you, and they know what they're getting when they
There's
hire you.
been multiple studies that show that it is not your first degree, like if we're using the LinkedIn, right?
Right?
It's not your first people, the people you know the best. It's the second. So it's the people who know your people that are the greatest lever to pull on getting the connections that are going to result in an internship or a job. And there's been multiple studies done that show the power of, and I just did this with a student that we were working with. I went on to LinkedIn. I said, "Well, what was the name of that lady that you met?" And this was somebody on Long Island, and the students on Long Island. We go onto LinkedIn, we look up this person, and this person, the student that I'm working with, is shying away from like putting themselves out there, right? And I said, "Well, let's just look at what this looks like." So he said, "Well, this person gave me their card. I looked up the person on LinkedIn. And then I said, "Well, look, oh, she's posted 6 times in the last month. You can start by like liking her post, commenting on her post if you feel like you don't have valuable content to put out yet."
Right?
And then I went over to her profile and I'm like, "Oh, look, she's in New Jersey. She was at an event on Long Island. Of the people who commented on her latest post, 2 of them were seconds to me here in Cincinnati." I go,
Right.
"Let's look at how I'm interconnected with her." It's all about the connections and building those connections.
Yeah, and those relationships. And in fact, when people are looking, when I've hired jobs in the past, I will put a post on LinkedIn. Hey, we're looking for a new finance person. I had my own company, a sports podcast company. When we needed new hires, I put it out to my network. Say, hey, do you
Yeah.
know anyone who would be good for this position? And had a quick little 3 sentence description, and they would share it with their connections. And I'm sure what happens is someone that I know, like you said, it's the second connection,
Yeah,
shares it with somebody and says, hey, a friend of
exactly.
mine's hiring for this role. You should connect with them. Right?
Or I comment on that and say, "Oh, I've got somebody in mind." Well, now it goes into my feed. "Oh, Lisa Marker Robbins commented on this." And then you go over to look at what it is. It's, yeah, connect, connect,
Yeah.
connect.
And it's super important. And I know so many students spend so much time thinking about their resume and their CV. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have one,
Right.
but at the end of the day, we're a digital world now.
Yeah.
And I don't think I even have a CV anymore. When someone wants to, what's your background? I just send them my
Yep.
LinkedIn profile,
Profile. Yeah.
right? Make sure that's really good. I tell everyone, to all my students and my own kids, make sure your LinkedIn profile is up to date and really, really thoughtfully done.
Yes,
Super
we actually
important.
have a LinkedIn guide for students at flourishcoachingco.com/LinkedIn if people want to download it. And it kind of walks you through like what makes it good and how to do it. So, well, this has been fantastic, Stephen. We will for sure link to your sports business camps in the show notes. Is there?
Sportsbizbootcamp.com, because we're saying our websites, sportsbizbootcamp.com. And I look forward to, if any of you guys are interested in sports, chatting with you about the industry or the business. You could look me up on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to connect with any of your clients or any of the listeners, because connecting and building relationships is what I love to do. And
There's the
talking
power of
about
LinkedIn.
talking about the business of sports, right? So
Yeah.
if they could come to a boot camp, great. If they can't, that's fine too. 'Cause I'd love to chat.
Okay, so you heard it. You've got an offer there for an informational interview, listeners, which is something we teach about the power of that in Module 4 of the course. Stephen will have your website and your LinkedIn profile in the show notes so that people can connect and just send Stephen a DM and say, I've heard you on Lisa's podcast. Can we chat? So,
Terrific.
Stephen, it was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you again. It was really great to be on the show and looking forward to continuing our relationship. And again, like Lisa said, we met for the first time a
Yeah.
week ago, right? And
Yeah.
we
I mean,
met in
there's the
person,
power.
we
Right.
connected, and the first thing I said was, I'm going to be at this show. I sent her a text. Hey, I'm going to be here. I assume you might be here because it's your business as well. And we got together for an hour and had a cup of coffee. It
Yep.
starts with that.
Absolutely. We did not know each other 3 weeks ago.
Exactly.
And it was actually on social media. Somebody posted about your new sports business boot camp for young people. And I thought, oh, this is somebody who could talk about this industry for our listeners. And I don't even know her, but she was in my feed because of a mutual connection we had. And I said, hey, could you introduce me to him? Here's my email address. She's like, absolutely. She sent the email of introduction. You and I connected separately. Then we both realized we'd be at the same conference, spend some time together in person, and here we
Right.
are. So there's the power of
Exactly.
connections, my friends.
Exactly. Well, Lisa, it was great. Have a great weekend. And
Thanks,
thanks
Stephen.
again for having me.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.